It is only move 15, and here Hans Niemann playing as white, facing off versus the man who tried to ruin his life by accusing him of cheating. That's right, Magnus Carlsen himself. It's only move 15, and what does Hans Niemann do right here? That's right, he sacrifices the knight to f6, and no, this is not a knight sack, it is a statement. Hans Niemann saying, Magnus, you're not even on my level, you are beneath me, you are scum. All right, going back to the very beginning here, Hans Niemann playing as white, opens 1e4, and by the way, this game just took place this week in the Titled Tuesday tournament on chess.com. It's literally their latest and greatest match in this ongoing Magnus-Hans Niemann saga. All right, here, Magnus, as black, does he go 1e5? His typical response to Hans in their one-on-one games. Oh no, he's not playing solid today. He plays the most aggressive move in response to 1e4. That's right, 1c5, the Sicilian defense. Magnus here is playing for a win right from the very first move. All right, Hans, knight f3. Knight to c6, and now bishop b5. The Rossolimo Sicilian is on the board. Hans Niemann's typical move here against knight to c6. Now here Magnus has many options. He can go g6 or e6 or e5 or even Prognanda's new opening h5 and many other ideas. In this game though, he plays the move he played first versus Fabiano Caruana. Not first, but famously versus Fabiano Caruana in their World Championship match, g6, intending the fianchetto of the dark squared bishop, a very combative idea. Now Hans, he's got a lot of options. The two main moves include taking on c6 or castling, intending c3 and d4 in the spirit of the Ruy Lopez opening. However, in the game, he does take on c6, damaging black's pawn structure as Fabiano Caruana did in their World Championship match. Now Magnus here, he's a big fan of d takes c6, capturing away from the center, and it's what he does here. D takes c6, again, capturing away from the center, but opening up the d file and increasing his control of all of these squares with the queen. Now here Hans, he continues. d3, guarding e4, a typical idea here. c3 and d4 is no longer the best plan. Instead, he's going for a light squared strategy, giving up his light squared bishop and then putting all of these center pawns on light squares. A very solid idea. Now Magnus, queen c7, guarding e5 a little bit, making e5 ideas just a little bit harder to play in the future. However, Hans Niemann, he sees this, and again, the audacity of this man, Magnus, literally trying to persuade him not to go e5, and Hans here, he's got a lot of ideas. He could castle, he could go h3, or knight bd2, or a4. There are a lot of ideas. But no, e5 immediately is the response. Hans bringing the fight to Magnus in this game. And real fast, for the heck of it, I want to highlight my favorite comment on my YouTube channel from this past week. This man right here pointing out, my aura is increasing, apparently. Who would have thought? Dr. Mike Jensen's aura, so hot right now. Oh, even better. Dr. Mike Jensen's aura is over 9,000. All right, from here, black, knight to h6. What is the idea? Well, obviously, f6 being guarded by the pawn, black cannot bring the knight there. Therefore, Magnus finds a completely different way to develop the knight, likely intending knight f5, bishop g7, castles, and so on, getting what looks to be a pretty harmonious, if unusual, development scheme. All right, Hans, castles is the move. Knight to f5, rook e1, both sides slowly building up their pieces, building up the tension in this middle game. And now Magnus plays a move that is just completely shocking to me, a really alien looking move. Here I thought he would go bishop g7 and castles, classical chess. Oh no, Magnus here, again, he's playing for a win right from the very first moves. He plays the move knight to d4. What on earth? Magnus going knight to h6 to f5 to d4, moving a piece 3 times in the opening. It's only move 8, and Magnus spending 3 out of his 8 moves on this knight, and literally giving white the chance to take on d4 if he wants to. What on earth are you doing, Magnus? You're melting my brain here. All right, Hans, he sees the threat. Black here, he wants to go bishop g4, piling up pressure on this knight, a very common idea in the Ruy Lopez and many other openings. Of course, if white wastes a move and goes, I don't know, a4, bada boom, bada bang, bishop g4 would be devastating, piling up even more pressure on this knight. So instead, Hans, he sees this, demonstrates his sagacity. He plays the move h3, simply guarding that g4 square on the king side. Now here Magnus, again, so far he's played the ludicrous idea of 3 knight moves out of 8 moves total. So Magnus surely here is going to develop or something, play some sort of logical move. I don't know, bishop g7, bishop b6. Well, if you thought that, you thought wrong. Magnus here, he takes the knight. Knight takes f3. What on earth am I watching? Magnus, knight h6 to f5 to d4 just to trade on f3? Is Magnus mocking his opponent? Is he saying, I can do literally whatever I want, move the knight 4 times out of 9 moves, and still beat you? Is that the idea here? Hans Niemann must be fuming right now. All right, Hans, he takes the knight. Queen takes f3. Black, bishop g7, piling up pressure on that pawn on the e5 square. And we're starting to see glimpses of the weird idea behind knight h6 to f5 to d4, taking on f3. He's removing, if very slowly, removing that knight on the f3 square. And once it goes away, the pawn on the e5 square is a little bit less defended. So black here, piling up pressure on that e5 square, and Hans here has to defend. Now, here Hans can defend with either the bishop, like this, or perhaps the queen, maybe intending b3, bishop b2, and so on. In the game, bishop f4 is the move. Very logical. Threatening now e6 with the attack on the queen. Here, Magnus Carlsen, he sees the threat. Bishop e6, blockading the pawn on the e5 square. There are no e6 threats anymore, and therefore no discovered attacks on the queen. Now, both sides play some natural positional moves. a4, gaining space on the queen side. AlphaZero would approve of this move, and black here, a5, blocking the pawns. Now, the a-pawns are touching, and both sides fighting for control of the queen side squares. Now, here, Hans, how's he going to continue development? Knight d2 is the move. Very logical, likely intending knight to e4 or c4, trying to bring out more and more of his pieces. Now, Magnus here plays a very interesting idea. He doesn't castle. He doesn't castle kingside, and he doesn't castle queenside. Instead, h6, a move he played very often versus Fabio Caruana in his world championship match in very similar Rossolimo-style positions. The idea being gaining control of g5, first of all, stopping any sort of knight g5 or bishop g5 nonsense, but also potentially threatening g5 later, gaining space on the king side. And if black does not castle, his rook on the h8 square could actually become active on the king side with some h5 g4 ideas and so on. All right, Hans here. How's he going to respond to the threat, the growing threat of g5 ideas? Well, here, Hans, again, this guy, he wants blood on the chessboard. He wants to just eviscerate Magnus Carlsen, the man who tried to ruin his life. Knight e4. He jumps up with the knight, not necessarily the strongest move, but certainly the most aggressive one here. What are the threats? Well, first of all, you do threaten the c5 pawn, but beyond that, Hans Niemann has a very, very insane idea coming up next here. And real fast, this video is sponsored by me, Dr. Mike Chess. If you want to level up your chess insanely fast and connect with over 300 online chess players and learn how to improve very, very fast, go to drmikechess.com. Links right there. Also down below in the description. It's my free online community hosted on school.com. And I have people gaining literally over 300 ELO in less than 1 month just from joining that free online community. If you want to get better at chess really freaking fast and have a lot of fun doing it, drmikechess.com. Go there, sign up. It's for free. I'll onboard you. I'll message you. We'll get rocking and rolling. Now back to the video. All right, here Magnus. He sees the one threat of knight takes c5. And here he defends the pawn with b6. But this is a massive strategic mistake. Magnus Carlsen making what appears to be an honest blunder. Or is he just egging Hans Niemann on, saying, you don't even have the guts to play the move you want to play right here? I don't know which one it is. I'm leaning towards the latter because Magnus does not miss these things. Instead, the best move here for black was simply taking on e5, and Magnus would get a pretty good position after, say, bishop takes, and then queen takes e5. But instead, Magnus Carlsen literally begging Hans Niemann to play the move he wants to play. Magnus ignoring the threat, going b6. And what is the threat? Here, Hans Niemann, he's making a statement. Knight to f6 check, giving up the knight, hitting the king. And what is the tactical justification? It's simple. Black here, if he takes on f6, white takes back like this, with the double attack on the bishop and the queen. The bishop or the queen will fall, likely the bishop, and with that, the game. Magnus Carlsen, he sees the threat. King to f8, sliding over to the king side, ignoring the statement by Hans Niemann. We all know what it means. He's saying, Magnus, you're not even on my level. Get off the board. All right, Hans Niemann, the knight is under attack. He drops back. Knight to e4. Now, rook d8. Magnus Carlsen getting his last piece into the game, besides maybe the rook, but the rook might be active on the king side later, so overall, not a bad square for that piece. Now here, Hans, how does he want to continue? Honestly, it's not that easy to find the right path forward. His pawn on the e5 square is under attack. Black here potentially threatening a lot of ideas, including rook to d4, g5, gaining space. Black here starts to have all the ideas, and yes, the computer still finds white better, but honestly, it's not so easy to play the white position here. All right, Hans, b3. Just gaining some space, guarding c4, stopping c4 ideas from black, and now Magnus, king to g8, opting again not to trade on e5. Now Magnus here, this guy is doing his CCTOs, his checks, captures, threats, optimizations. He knows the pawn on e5 is hanging, but he opts to maintain maximum complexity in the game, and he simply slides the king over, king to g8. What's the idea? Well, the king is surprisingly safe on g8 and the rook on h8 if black ever goes for ideas like g5, h5, g4, and so on. The rook might actually be safe on the h8 square, funnily enough. Now Hans, he sees the threat of g5 and he plays the other AlphaZero move, h4, trying to clamp down on the g5 square with everything that he's got. Honestly, a pretty solid move here by Hans. However, again, I'm starting to feel like he doesn't quite know how to proceed. Now, Magnus, he's got a ton of different options. You can improve the queen, the rook, and so on. But actually here he plays a little bit of a mistake, and I think this was an honest mistake here. Maybe the first one in the game. Magnus here, rook d5, into a little bit of time pressure, down to 2 minutes on the clock, plays rook d5, pressuring the pawn on the e5 square. It looks logical, but black here, of course, could have just taken on e5 right away. Why did he go rook d5 instead? Well, Magnus here, he must have his reasons. If you think you know why, comment down below. I'd love to know why you think Magnus here played this move, because I can't quite figure it out completely. But anyways, here, Hans Niemann, he sees the rook, and he slides back with his knight, knight c3. Now, the drawback of this move is the knight is not as actively placed. It's much more active on e4, and in fact, Hans Niemann here, he missed what appears to be almost a winning idea. If you like puzzles, pause the video right now and try to find the winning idea for white and comment down below if you see it. Should I show it to you guys? You know what? Let's show it. The winning idea here, knight to f6, the fork on the king and the rook. Hans Niemann, he missed the idea. The guy who claims to be a future world champion, and I'm rooting for him, he misses this idea. And what is the justification? Again, you're forking the king and the rook, and if you take, white takes back with the double attack, and black loses the precious dark squared bishop. Hans Niemann, how did you miss the idea? I don't know. Instead, he goes back, knight c3, missing the key idea, and Magnus here, he begins to take over. He plays an unbelievable idea, g5, the temporary pawn sack. What's the justification? If white takes on g5 twice like this, the e5 pawn falls, and suddenly black is taking over. For example, h takes is a mistake because h takes, bishop takes is met by rook takes, and black again is taking over. Instead, in the game, the bishop goes back. Bishop g3 played in the game. Hans Niemann on the defensive now. Now, g takes h4. Bishop takes, and then rook takes e5. Magnus Carlsen now officially up a single pawn in this game, that being the critical e-pawn. Hans Niemann down a pawn versus the GOAT. However, he does have some pressure. He's got some pressure against the king, and overall, black's pieces, there's sort of this weird mishmash of squares and pieces in development, and this lack of piece coordination may give Hans some chances to claw back in this game. Now, here, Hans, demonstrating his sagacity, finds the key idea, bishop g3, the apparent pin on the rook to the queen. Of course, Magnus Carlsen, he sees this and he saw one step further into the future using his time machine that he calls his brain. He plays the move, rook takes e1, the idea being you hit the king with check and therefore give your queen time to get out of the way of the attack. The rook takes, the queen slides to d7, and again, black stabilizing here with the extra pawn and the bishop pair. The only thing Hans has going for him is perhaps the safer king. Now, here, Hans, bishop e5 is the move, and I gotta tell you, this move here, it reminds me of the saying, playing not to lose. Hans Niemann here, playing for simply some trades here, instead of going aggressive with a move like knight to e4. Hans Niemann, starting to flounder a little bit in time pressure. He's only got 20 seconds left on the clock here. Black here, he takes on e5, bishop takes, then rook takes, then the key idea, queen to d4. The queen flies in, targets the very loose rook on e5, as well as the knight on the c3 square. What can Hans Niemann do? He's only got one idea here. He has to move the queen over to g3, attack the king with check, defend the rook, and then defend the knight. That is the only way. Hans Niemann, he finds it, queen g3, again, sliding the queen over. The king goes to h7. But now black has the additional threat of rook to g8, lining up with the king on the g1 square. Has Magnus Carlsen found a way to turn the tides and turn his weak king into an asset and the safe white king into a liability? All right, Hans Niemann here. The knight on the c3 square, it's under attack. He's got to find the right move for that knight. What does he play? In the game, he goes knight to e4. But this, as you can see by the eval bar collapsing, Hans Niemann, he chokes. He chokes. He wanted this rematch so badly, and he cannot find the right continuation. Instead, the right move is knight to e2, dropping back to the very safe e2 square. And if black gives a check on the a1 square, for example, the king goes up, and black has no real threats, and white is fine. Instead, in the game, knight to e4 chosen. The knight jumps up. It looks aggressive. It looks very ambitious, but it's got two problems. One is queen to a1 check, a devastating move. The other, as Magnus played in the game, and I'll show the idea here in just a second, the other is rook g8, targeting the weak queen on the g3 square. And here, Hans Niemann, what can he do? His rook's under attack. If he moves the queen to, say, f3, he loses the rook. Here, Hans Niemann, he again chokes. Queen to f4 chosen in the game. And now the final move to finish Hans Niemann off, to put a fork in this guy. This guy is cooked. Rook to g4. And here's the problem. The queen is overloaded. It's almost impossible to maintain the defense of the rook on the e5 square, even after other moves like, say, queen to h2, which looks logical, defending the rook and keeping the queen alive. It loses to queen to a1, checkmate. Therefore, in this position right here, Hans Niemann, he resigns. He taps out, and Magnus Carlsen gets the KO. He has defeated, once again, Hans Niemann in one-to-one intellectual combat. Wow, what a game between Magnus and Hans Niemann in this insane Titled Tuesday Blitz game. All right, Chess YouTube, hope you enjoyed this insane grudge match featuring Hans Niemann and Magnus Carlsen. This is essentially the greatest show in the online chess world right now. These two players facing off at the highest levels. So if you enjoyed it, please show me some love. Smash that like button, comment down below. You can say whatever you want. I'll get back to you. And by the way, if you're watching this and you're tired of watching endless YouTube videos and not being able to level up on your own, my number one piece of advice for you, join my free community, drmikechess.com. I have a ton of people in there, over 300 right now, who are all leveling up and improving. A lot of my students are gaining 100 to even 300 ELO in a single month. I actually have one student gaining over 300 ELO in a single month since working with me. So if you want those kinds of results, join my free community. It is free for right now. You can join at that link. I've got free courses, free group coaching calls. I had one today as I record this. And, it really is important for me that you guys succeed and hit your online chess goals. So I really care about your success. So if you want to level up very, very fast, just join today. I'll onboard you and we'll get rocking and rolling. So As always, I wish you the best of luck in your chess improvement journey in 2025 and beyond, and I'll see you in the next video.